Broadcasting with Ceri Jones.
This week's guest is the highest English fly fishing international capped angler with 48 caps to date in both Rivers and Loughstyle. In fact, we both fished our first international at Bull Bridge in Kent some 30 years ago. He is the resident professional guide at Chew Valley Lake and Blagden, giving instruction as well as guiding for both trout and pike. He also talks about the two major UK fly fishing events which he runs, plus his passion for monster pike at Chew Valley. He then goes on to tell us about the uncertain future of Bristol Reservoirs. Welcome to my chat with John Horsey.
Hi, Ceri.
Hiya, John. How are you keeping?
Fine, thank you, mate. Managed to keep away from the horrible virus so far, so keeping okay.
It's madness at the moment, isn't it? And the thing is, they keep changing restrictions. I don't know if down with you is the same, but in Wales, every 3 weeks something is different, you know, and you don't know what have you got to do.
No, I think at the moment it's just lockdown, and we're staying away from the lakes, which are closed anyway at the moment. We should have been open for pike fishing in February, but sadly that's been curtailed now, mainly because the pike trials are so popular. People travel from all over the country. And of course, you can't stay, there's no accommodation, and people come down for 2 or 3 days at a time. So I was supposed to be starting back up again big time in the middle of Feb, but that's all on hold now until October, November time. So it doesn't look as if we'll be fishing here till at least March.
It's a tough time, all right. I'm looking forward to maybe March we'll be opening here with the trouts. It's good to chat to you again, because before I made this call to you, I was trying to think when I actually met you first. And I don't know if you remember this. It was my first international, it was, in Bull Bridge. Was that your first international as well?
Yeah, it was. What year was that? I reckon it was something like 89, something like that.
Yeah. Because I remember it was the first international for me. And what we did, it was a thing, I don't know if people do it now, we'd all have our own badges, you know, the enamel badge. It was Team England and Wales. And I remember by the bar, and I was chatting to you, and I swapped my Welsh badge for your English badge. And I've still got it somewhere.
Do you know, that's quite amazing, because that was my first international. And I can tell you, this is how I remember it. In practice, it was great. We had some really good fishing.
Yes.
On match day, it blew a hoolie.
That's right. Yeah.
Nowadays, they wouldn't even have let the boats out. There's no doubt about that. And I fished with a guy called Owen O'Sullivan from Ireland. And he'd been there for 5 days. And he'd practiced. And he'd caught nothing over the 5 days. And he said to me beforehand, he said, you can be in charge of the boat. And I thought, that's great, because I know where I want to go. We've done our practice. I'm all ready for this. And he said, as long as I catch a fish, because I haven't caught a fish. And I said, oh, no, we'll catch some fish. It's been great in practice. So we went out that day, and I remember I had one take on a black pennel and caught one fish. He had 6 takes. He hooked all 6 fish. He got broken on one of the ones that he hooked, and he landed 5 and won the brown bowl.
He was in the boat with you, the guy with the brown bowl?
Yeah, the guy with the brown bowl, my first international. I caught a fish, and that helped England to win the gold medal. And he caught his 5, and he won the brown bowl for Ireland. So what a first day's international fishing that was.
Yeah, it was horrific, wasn't it, that day? Really bad.
Oh, dreadful. And he was catching on I even remember, it's funny, he had the tags on his flies were probably half an inch long on each fly. And we got tangled up a couple of times with casting over each other's head, that sort of thing. And I was undoing his tangle. And I said, oh, your tag ends are really long on this, Owen. Do you want me to just snip them off? Because to be honest, they were tangling around my leader. And he said, no, keep them. Just in case I catch a big fish and it pulls it, I don't want to lose the fly. and I don't want to lose the fish. And I thought, you can cut them a lot shorter than that, but that's just the way he always fished.
Well, long droppers, you mean?
No, he had droppers, short droppers, about 4 or 5 inch long, and then the half blood knot that he tied his hook on with, the tag end off of those
I see what
was
you mean.
at least half an inch long. And it was a hell of a steak. And from then on, I thought, these fish obviously don't give a monkeys about tag ends, because there's me using really careful leaders. All my droppers were nicely done. No crinkles, nothing. His leaders and his droppers were terrible, thick old Maxima monofilament. And in a big wave like that, if they saw the fly, they took it. But I must admit, he hooked all his fish on a point fly, which was a damsel type fly. That's all it was. And the winds were so bad, we were just fishing sinking lines or intermediate lines or whatever we tried. You couldn't use a floater really because everything was getting blown around so much. But it's amazing, isn't it, how a little thing like that can stick in your mind for all those years.
Yeah.
30 years.
Blind. I know.
Doesn't seem like that.
No, I blanked that day. I think most of the team blanked that day. Most anglers blanked that day because they just weren't expected it.
I think we had 4 blanks in our team.
Yeah.
And but we had the rest of the team. I know I had 1 fish. Brian Ledbetter had 1 fish, and Leddy had been catching all week loads of fish. And Chris Ogborn had 2 fish, I think. But we had blanks in our team as well. But crikey, first international for both of us, then, mate.
I know.
And I remember when we did something for trout fishermen as well down at Wimbledon. Do you remember that?
We did, yeah. Yeah, I know what happened to Wimbledon with the dictaphone, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, that's the old joke. Do you use your dictaphone? No, I use my finger like everybody else. But right at the end of it, you had everything recorded beautifully on this dictaphone, and then I dropped it over the side of the boat.
I know.
Right at the end.
I know. Funny enough, I was down in Wimbledon last year, not to fish. It was winter time. I walked around the banks there, and there's a wire man angler, like a statue sort of thing, on the shore there. I will fish it again one day. But we did a few features at one time.
We did. It used to be a lovely place, and it was run very well. I think Bob Lunk was the bloke who ran it. We used to have Benson Hedges eats it down there as well. But it was beautiful, top of the water stuff, because there's not a lot of insect life in the place. But, they're always looking up for terrestrials, and it's so deep in places as well.
Yeah.
And crystal clear water, beautiful fishery. But it's been taken over this year, and it's had a real resurgence, and a lot of people have visited it and really had some great fishing. So things are looking on the up.
Oh, that's
now
good.
That it's privately being owned. So it's Mark that runs it down there, and he runs a fish farm as well. So he's in a really good position to run it properly with some decent fish. It's done well.
It's a beautiful part of the country as well, isn't it? I love North Devon there.
Yeah, it's really lovely. There's buzzards circling overhead all the time and screeching at you, and it's a lovely place.
Well, if they drain it one day, perhaps you can nip down and look for my dictaphone.
Yeah, that's right. It's only by the boat jetties, isn't it?
I can remember. We'd finished it. We were talking in the boat. I put it on the top of my Witchwood bag. That's what it was. Or might have been your bag. And then you actually flipped the lid, the top opener to go into the bag. Next thing, I could call in my eyes, seen a flash, plop.
That's right. I heard a plop, and you said, "Oh no, that's my dictaphone." And I thought, he's never going to speak to me again, Ceri.
I know. And we did a couple of features then for trout fish. I think we went Blagdon, and we knew a few places. Because I think we did.
Yeah, I remember you did a great cover shot, I think, on Blagdon by Blagdon Lodge.
That's right.
It?
Yeah.
Yeah, good man to work with, Ceri. You've been very good.
Yeah, it was a good day, that was. We did 1 or 2 things. I think you did stuff for Stillwater trout angler more than I did at one stage. And I went back to trout fish. Then you came back to trout fish after then. Yeah,
Roy Westwood contacted me. They set up Stillwater Trout Angler, and he had 3 sort of big names involved in the early days. And I think there was a lot of infighting between them, and everybody seemed to fall out. And so then he asked me to write and sort of contracted me to write with him. And it was great. I really enjoyed working with Roy.
Yeah.
Really good bloke. He's a good photographer, and he's a good writer as well. And we got on really well. So we had some great years. They were good years then. That's when the magazines were really flying, wasn't it?
It was. It was a big difference there then. I don't know if you knew today's Fly Fisher. I spoke to Andy Taylor yesterday, and they've had to put the magazine on hold because of the situation with lockdown. So
I saw that. I saw it on Facebook, I think.
Yeah, so hopefully maybe the spring or summer issue will be back. We need a really good magazine out there now.
Crunch. With the demise of Trout Fisherman magazine, which in my opinion was the best trout magazine out there on the market, no doubt about that. Had really good writers and good editor, good photographs always, good features. And it's definitely not the same now that it's merged with Trout and Salmon. Trout and Salmon's okay for a nice read, but really if you want to find out how to do things, Trout Fisherman was always that magazine. So now with today's Fly Fisher stopping for the time being, I hope that it doesn't for very long, because that's quality mag. You know, it's a good mag. Andy's a good chap as well. Yeah.
I don't know how the mag, because I haven't looked at the Trout Fisherman when it's gone now with Trout and Salmon, what it's like, so I can't really comment, but it always seemed to me the idea of it, it's almost like stillwater trout fishing and like salmon fishing and sea trout fishing in the rivers. It's almost the same as rugby and football. Yeah, okay, they played with the ball, but they're two different types of sports. Like the people who are fishing for salmon on the rivers, they don't want to know about blobs. And I don't know how that's going to work.
No, I think that's just Bauer Publications decided they didn't want to run two mags, they can only run one.
Yeah.
I mean, the circulation figures, the ABCs have gone down massively. And some of the magazines like Fly Fishing and Fly Time don't even have an ABC. So you don't even know what the circulation figures of those are.
Yeah.
So, we know nowadays you've only got to look in W.H. Smith's and see how empty the shelves are of all magazines. You know, things are being done online. People doing podcasts like we are.
Yeah.
And, there's different ways. If you want to learn how to tie a fly now, you just go onto YouTube and have a look at David McPhail's stuff or some of the guys that are out there. There's loads of people. And, with social media and Facebook now, everybody's become an instant expert and put in their opinions into things. So you've got to actually sift through a lot of these things.
Exactly.
Because, unfortunately, some of the people who are the loudest out there actually aren't very good. So you've really got to sift through a lot of the rubbish before you get to stuff that people know what they're talking about, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's one thing with the magazines. That you had credibility because they were like vetting the anglers. They knew they were either doing well in competition scenes or whatever. So you knew what you were getting. So
when I first started writing, I asked myself, why would anybody listen to anything that I've got to say? So when should I start writing? So I had lots of ideas, and I'd actually penned about 6 articles. But it wasn't until I fished for England the first time that I thought, well, I've got a England qualification now. I've probably got something to say to people. So I think now's the time to start writing. So I sent off my first article to Chris Dawn at Trout Fisherman. And he said, yeah, I really like it. It's written well. He said, but really, we want to do more than just the one feature. And I said, well, I've actually got 6 already done. So I sent them in to him, and they went straight in. And straight away, I started getting the lead articles in the magazine. So I've been fortunate because I've always found English and writing to be fairly easy, whereas I spent 20 years in accountancy and I never passed my maths O-level. So that probably speaks volumes. Yeah. The first job I had, I went from Bridgewater College where I was doing a business studies qualification, and I didn't do very well in that. So I actually applied for a job and got a job at Hinkley Point Nuclear Power Station. So that was my first job. And then to get a promotion, I had to move. So I went up to Portishead Power Station. And then I worked in a regional headquarters. So I did 20 years working for the Central Electricity Generating Board. And it was during that time that I qualified to fish for England. And because we had a big sports and social club and it was a big industry, they would encourage people to represent their countries. And they'd give you some time off, paid time off to actually represent your country, which was brilliant. And so that's how I started off. And then when Maggie Thatcher came to rule, she closed down and privatised the electricity supply industry. And so that was the end of the line for me. So that's when I managed to go out on an out placement. And I approached Bristol Water to see if they would take me on, because what the generating board were trying to do was get bums off of seats. So they would give you selective voluntary severance if you cleared off, basically. So even though I'd done 20 years working for them, I went to Bristol Water and said, look, if you could retrain me in fishery management, my company will pick up the bill for a year. So they grudgingly almost, because they thought there must be a catch to it, they said they would take me on. So I went back to my company, and then I had to persuade them to let me go, and which they did. And I was very grateful to my boss for letting me go. And so for the first year, I worked for Bristol Water. So I did just about every job you could think of by the fisheries. So I worked behind the counter in the lodge. I helped to grade the fish. I netted the fish out the stew ponds in sort of January, February time, when your fingers were so cold they were nearly dropping off. I had to clean off the bottoms of the boats and underseal them and paint them. And I did work inside on the boats, cleaning them out every year, which people don't see, but they've got to be renovated every year. Worked on the engines, checked the permits, did everything for a year. And during that year, I wanted to find out if there was any demand for any sort of tuition services. So Bristol Water let me take people out in the boat and charged a very small fee for my services. And once people realised that the services were available, I was booked every other day, statistically.
Yeah.
So then from then on, 28 years later, I've been a full-time professional fly fishing guide. So I was the first ever professional fly fishing guide in the UK. There were plenty of gillies and things, but not fishing guides. I've been doing it now for 28 years. In fact, this year will be my 29th year.
Is it? Because there's very few people that do it full-time. You know, I know a few people do that, you know, being as a boatman or a gillie or guiding or tuition, but they've always got something else as well, you know, to make ends meet.
I've managed to do it by running competitions as well. I've been running major competitions. In fact, the individual competition is still the biggest individual fly fishing competition in Europe and probably in the world. And, you know, we've had Lexus sponsor it. So we were giving away Lexus RX 450 and 400 hybrid cars, you know, which retailed over £65,000. And we organised one to be given away for Trout and Salmon's 25th or 50th anniversary. I can't remember what it is now, 25th or 50th. So we gave one away for a prize. So, you know, there's never been prizes like that in fly fishing ever, and there probably never will be again.
Is the Lexus still running?
No, the Lexus doesn't run. That's now been supported by Anglers World. So now Anglers World are our masthead sponsor, and it's still a massive comp. And last year in 2020, even though most competitions didn't go ahead because of COVID, we ran the Anglers World final at Draycott, and that sold out in 2 days, 100 people. And we had that, and Gary Morris won it for the second time in 2 years. And we ran it for 100 people, and Ivor Jones and his staff at Draycott were fantastic, and there were no cases arising after the competition. And we used social distancing, and we're very strict on the way we organised the match. We even managed to have a bit of a presentation at the end, although it was outdoors, not indoors. And we had some food afterwards. And I also ran the Cortland Fly Fishing Championships at Chew and Blagden. So we run both lakes and simultaneously. And we had 80 odd people in that over 2 days with a couple of days practice as well. And we also had a presentation outside again with some food. So we managed to run both of the competitions I run. So we haven't had a break now for over 20 years running major competitions. Now, there's always heats, but last year, because we had so many dates cancelled, we decided to change the format for the first time ever and dispense with the heats and just have a final. So we invited people who'd already entered the heats, which we'd cancelled. They had priority. And then we opened it up to all and sundry. And actually, we could have probably sold it twice. But it's been going for a long time. It's got a lot of history. A lot of great anglers been fishing in it. And, there's not many competitions where you can fish a competition and possibly end up fishing with a world champion from various countries. So we got a lot of people come from abroad. Obviously, we lost those last year because they couldn't travel. Yeah. But it's still going on. And I've entered both heats, both competitions are going ahead again, both the Anglers World Individual and the Cortland teams of 6. And we're still not quite sure about heats yet. So it's a case of watch this space for the heats, but we've got the dates organised and in the calendar already for September and August, late August and early September for both finals. So whether we have the heats or not, we will still have the major days, and hopefully by then everybody will be vaccinated.
Yeah.
And we should be getting back to some sort of normal lifestyle.
As regards competition fishing yourself now,
Yeah.
do you still fish the comps?
Oh, crumbs. It's what drives me, to be perfectly honest. When I was a kid, I always wanted to either be an England footballer or an England cricketer. I managed to get to the dizzy heights of semi-professional football, and I played cricket for Somerset when I was younger. But once I started fly fishing, because I'd been fishing since I was about 6, and back in my hometown of Bridgewater, I used to be fishing for eels in the ditch at the bottom of the garden, then went on to roach and rudd and tench and perch and bream. But then once I started fly fishing, I then thought I should be able to, hopefully qualify for England, which I did. So I'm on my 47th cap for England at the moment. So I'm the highest capped England international angler. And I should have got my 48th cap this year, but the internationals were cancelled. So I qualified for the Tros-Finnith International back in your home country land. So I was looking forward to fishing at Tros. But I'm still fishing all the comps, and it's been great. I've managed to get a team gold medal in the World Championships. I've had individual bronze in the World Championships. I've been in the top 10 individual placings 4 times in 4 different countries in the World Championships. I've had a silver and a bronze individual in the European Championships, one in Ireland and one in Sweden. I've been national rivers champion. I've been national Loughstyle champion. I was runner-up again in 2019. And, I still love it. I've been top English rod and got the Garatham Trophy. I've never won the Brown Bowl, but I have been runner-up for Brown Bowl in Ireland, in Lochleen. So I still love competition fishing as much as ever. And I still try to convince and get as many people as possible into competition fishing, because I think it's just a great way of fishing. It's where all the great ideas for fly fishing come from. And there's a very friendly way of fishing with new people. So as Mott Morgan once said, in a competition, you often start off fishing with a stranger, and at the end of the day, you get out the boat having made a new friend. And no word could be more true than that.
I bet your trophy cabinet at home is bigger than Man United's.
No, the thing is about this, we only get little badges and things, don't we, really, and medals. And I'm looking around me at the moment, and I've got a big framed plan picture of Chew and Blagden Lakes on my office wall. And I've got my World Championship and European Championship medals just hung up on the corners of one of the maps. And I've got no trophy cabinet, so to speak of. I used to give my daughter or my sons my medals from my internationals, so some of those are missing. But I've got quite a few. I suppose I ought to put them into in some sort of cabinet somewhere. And I've got a few trophies that are on my window ledge here. But it's funny. I was thinking, when did I win the Rivers National? And it was because I got this trophy up here that says it was in 1996, so that's going back a few years. But I'm probably better known for my Loughstyle fishing than my rivers fishing. But not a lot of people realise, with the internationals and the world championships and that, a lot of them are based on rivers anyway. So that's where I've won quite a lot of my medals, on the rivers. Would
you prefer Loughstyle fishing or fishing on the river?
I like the bigger challenge, and to me the bigger challenge is always on the lochs and the lakes. With a river you get a given section to fish when you're in a competition, and you've got to try and work out 100 metres, 150, 200 metres, something like that. You can see the seams in the rivers. Often you can see through, so you can see fish. To me, it isn't the challenge of fishing on something that's, I don't know, like Lake Yukonbeen in Australia in the World Championships. It's 15 times the size of Sydney Harbour. So where the hell do you start when you're out in a boat trying to catch fish there? And, on a bank there, I remember catching 2 fish on black hoppers on dries. I didn't see any fish rise. I was just fishing blind, fishing from the bank and in an area. And as I was fishing, I saw a brown trout jump out the water. And it was only a smallish fish, about a foot long. But I thought, That's a measurer. So I just cast and cast and cast and cast. And at one time, I'd cast this dry fly out, and I thought, that looks too small. These Christmas tree beetles and things like that are coming off not Christmas trees, what are they? Tea tree beetles that were on the water were much bigger than the hopper I was using. So I remember looking in my fly box as I'd cast my fly on the water, and I suddenly saw a head of a fish come up and take my dry. So I dropped my dry fly box, struck this fish and got it in. Now, if you caught a fish on Yukon Bean from the bank, you were going to be in the top 5, because there was never any more than 5 people in any session with 20 countries taking place that actually caught fish. So while I was playing it, another fish rose. So I carried on up and down that bank trying to catch that fish, and finally it took. So I'd landed 2. Then we had a massive thunderstorm, and not another fish was caught during that time for the next 2 hours. And those 2 fish won the session for me. So, just thinking of things like that, that sort of challenge on huge lakes is what always has driven me. I love river fishing. I like it. But if I had a choice, it would always be the lakes.
I like the vastness of the big lakes as well, For years I used to go to Graffham and Rutland, and obviously Chew and Blagden, but then when I got the taste of Ireland, that was it then. The Mask and the Corrib for me, it was an addiction. You never know. Your next fish could be something exceptional. That was the addiction for me.
So what was the size of that huge brownie you caught?
I've had countless ones over 15, but the Corrib record is, when I actually caught it, it was £25 2 ounces. By the time I took it into the town and to have it verified and weighed, and it was officially 23.12. So that was still the record. The old record was 21. So
that is incredible, mate.
And I've had a couple up to 19. And even though a few things have been mentioned on the internet, the vast majority of fish have returned. I've only kept 4, and I've had them cased. But everything else goes back, because when you spend all the hours and days, hundreds and thousands of hours really, on that lake, and what I find when you're sitting in a pub, people say, why don't you just take a picture of it, But I thought to myself, people who say that haven't experienced what I've experienced. You go to especially the west of Ireland, most of the pubs there, they got cased fish in the walls. And there's anglers in the bar, and you're talking fishing, and then after a few pints, you're looking up and you're thinking, Jesus. And they spur you on to see these magnificent cased trout. That wouldn't have been the same if you just had pictures on the wall.
No.
No. So feel it's good to keep the history and the tradition going.
There is another way of looking at it as well, because I know I'm very much into catch and release, but you've got to be realistic at times as well. A huge fish like that is a very old fish. That's the other thing. Whether they're ferox or not is debatable, but certainly, these huge fish are old fish, so they aren't going to live that much longer. They're not going to carry on getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And also, some do struggle to go back. And if the odd one is killed, I don't think, it's too serious.
Yeah.
The thing. I caught a brown trout in Tasmania. I was with Christopher Bassano, and he took me to a river that he didn't actually tell me the name of. He might have done, bless him, but I'd forgotten anyway. And I was with Martin Founds, and we were filming it. And we were fishing for these big brownies in a smallish river. But there was a factory nearby, and there was an outlet. And by this outlet, Chris obviously knew there was some big fish. And we saw these fish, and we both said, they've got to be double figure. Anyway, I hooked a fish. We saw a fish move. So I was just about to drop my nymph on it. He said, no, mate, don't bother with that. He took off my fly, broke off the leader, put some stronger leader on, and we just put a little woolly bugger on, black one. I dropped it down, and this fish just came and nailed it, absolutely nailed it. And I hooked it, and it jumped, and it is the biggest brown trout I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. It
ran across the river, and it went into a shallow pool. And you could see its dorsal fin and its tail fin sticking out the water with me attached to it. And Bassano legged it across the river. He's about 6 foot, and he used to be a professional cricketer. He used to play for Tasmania. He played for Derbyshire in our country, which is where I met him. I took him on the tour a few times. So when I went to Tasmania, to his home country, he looked after me. took me to this river, legged it across and netted it in this shallow pool. Now, if that fish had gone downstream, it would have spooled me and bust me to bits. No doubt about it whatsoever. And we got this fish out of the landing net, and we didn't kill it. It took both of us to hold it up. Martin then, who'd been filming a bit lower downstream, came up and filmed us with this fish before we released it. And it's got to be closer to 30 pounds and 25. And Chris had netted one and weighed one for one of his clients at 28 pounds a couple of weeks previously. So he's used to seeing big fish. I've caught loads of pike and seen loads of pike to mid-20s to mid-30s. So I'm used to holding up and weighing big fish.
Yeah.
But this was an enormous fish. And we put it back. And this fish, even with the short fight that he did, we let it go, and we let it go close to the bank under a tree. And there was a branch in the water, and it was just under the foam where the foam was, and it was sort of beating up the water a bit. We went downstream, filmed him catching some fish. About 2 hours later, we came back. That fish was in exactly the same position. But, you know, even though it was that big, you could hardly see it. It was that well camouflaged against its background. We did give it a bit of a nudge in the tail, and it swam off upstream. But, you know, I've seen big brownies, and they are something wonderful. So, and
the thing is, when you see a photograph of a big fish, whether it's a trout or a pike, it's great. It's nice to see. But when you actually see a fish like a 20-pound trout or a 40-pound pike, it's just beyond words. It's like jaw-dropping. Yeah. Like I saw I actually photographed the British record pike. I was there, the 46-pound. It took two people to lift it up. Yeah. I got photographs of it.
What, from Llandegford?
Yeah. And I went over there. I had a call from Angling Times, Anglers Mail at the time, to go over there. I mentioned this story before in one of the podcasts, but I'll tell you briefly what happened. I was at home, had a call, can you get over to Llandeg? They think they've got a British record pike. So I jumped in the car, raced over there, got to the dam wall, and then one of the boys was there in a speedboat, took me all the way to the bottom end to Green Pool. And as I got to Green Pool, there was about 4 or 5 people there. As soon as I got out the boat, they said, we've just put it back. I said, oh no. So it took me the best part of an hour having to get over there. So we were standing there, talking, and that was before mobile phones then. So there's no photographs of it. I thought, I don't believe it. So then, anyway, within 5 minutes, chatting there, the fish came back into the shore, into the side. Now, you couldn't have made it up. Next thing, I told,
no way.
Yeah, I told Roy, quick, grab it. So him and his mate casually lifted it up. I took about 4 frames, put it back in the water, and she swam off. And it was on there.
Well, that is almost unbelievable, man.
Yeah, as if she wanted to come back in for a photograph. She was probably stressed, you know, and because they actually had to weigh the fish up in the local farm, which is on the top of Green Pool, and they weighed it on scales where they used to weigh potatoes. No doubt they had it verified, but it was a hell of a fish. And you can't imagine, you can't imagine until you see a 46-pound pike. It's like incredible. It's like a crocodile. But,
well, one of my clients from Italy, Enrico Pini, caught a 40-pound, 8-ounce pike on the fly fishing with me. Wow. And I weighed it.
Wow.
And it was a huge fish. We'd actually seen it come for a fly before. And we decided to leave the area, or I decided to. And he said, no. He couldn't speak a lot of English, but no, big fish. I said, I know, let's rest it. It'll still be there. We'll just go up to the end of the bay, and then we'll change flies, go back and have another go for it. So we spent 20 minutes somewhere else, came back into the part of Villis that we were fishing before, changed flies, first cast down in the same area, 2 pike came after the fly, and both were huge, but they didn't take it. So we cast out again, started retrieving the fly, trawled it back up. As it was coming up, you could see this fish come up, it took it and went down. And quite a long time later, we got it into the boat, 40 pounds, 8 ounces.
Wow.
What a fish that was. And at the time, I just wanted it to be over 30. And when they, because there were 3 of us in the boat, the other guy, one of the guys could speak good English. And I was holding the scales. He said, no, 40. I said, no, you hold it. So I looked at it, and it never crossed my mind it was over 40. And to be honest, the scales went between 40 pound, 8 ounces and 41 and a quarter. And we could not keep it still because it was so heavy, even with two of us holding the weigh bar. So we gave it the lowest weight, which was £40.8, but I reckon it was more like £40 and 3/4, maybe even 41. But, you know, it is what it is. And it was a fantastic fish. But I know what you mean. These are such huge fish. I've had plenty of 30s in the boat, you know, very lucky on Chew because there are some huge fish and they've been caught to 44, I think, on Chew. And there have been fish over 47 caught on Blagden, but by the staff. And they were photographed and weighed, but that was some years ago now. And we're still hoping that there's some 40s left in Blagden as well. There has been a 40 caught on the fly there. 40, I think that was 44. So amazing fish. But Llandega's still got that record of 46.12, I think, wasn't it?
They seem to have disappeared in Llandegfydd now. I don't know what.
Yeah. I think the problem is there was a lot of problem with handling fish at that time as well, and chinning fish and that sort of thing. And you know, these fish are getting towards the end of their lives. That's the other thing. You know, I've spoken about this earlier. On Chew, people say that the big pike live fast and die young, and they feed on trout. It's a load of crap. I've tagged 765 pike on Chew, and I've had an awful lot of recaptures. I've caught a lot myself, and I've had a lot of people give me the tag numbers from the fish that I've tagged. And my calculation is the fish put on between 2 to 2.5 pounds a year. I've also had a lot of scale samples done by some of the top scale sampling people in the world, and they reckon it's a maximum £3 a year. So you're talking of 15-year-old fish that are around sort of £40, 15, 16 years old. And they don't live fast and die young. I'm sure a lot of them, their staple diet, in my opinion, is roach and perch. I'm sure they supplement their diet with trout, but I reckon a lot of them are dead fish, because what a lot of people don't realise is in all our big reservoirs, we lose the majority of our rainbows over the winter months.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you get 5% residual overwintered fish, I think you're doing well. It's as little as that. And some years, probably 1 or 2%, if that. So, you know, the brownies tend to survive, but the rainbows certainly don't. And, you know, the pike can pick up those off the bottom. It's dead easy for them. So, you know, I think that staple diet-wise, roach and perch, certainly on Chew it is.
Do you find that, you know, the most successful is roach? Well, after saying that, I don't know the story with Chew. You can use dead bait then, yeah? Roach dead bait?
Yeah, you can use, but only saltwater dead bait. So over the years, I think probably mackerel and smelt have been the best two baits. Herring always catches big fish. And, you know, people do use a lot of other things. One of my guys had a 35-pound plus on a bluey, which was on one of my rods. So he struck that and landed it. And I've never had a 35. I've had them up to 34 pounds odd. And I've caught 30-pounders on the fly, on dead baits, on wobbled baits, and on lures. So, you know, I've been very fortunate to go right through the Chew Valley experience, if you like, on pike fishing. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy the fly fishing most of all. Secondly, I enjoy the lure fishing. Much, much easier than fly fishing because you can chuck these big fox replicants and things out 50, 60 meters, no problem. They hit the bottom in 5 seconds in a lot of areas. And you can fish them all the way back through. With a fly, I mean, you're lucky if you're going to cast 40 yards. And then if you're fishing a sinking line, which we do most of the time, because the fish on Chew and Blagden are pretty much stapled to the bottom, so you've got to get your fly down all the time, you're probably only effectively fishing 10 yards of water on any cast.
Yeah.
So much harder. But, you know, when you get the takes, the great thing is you just never know what size fish you're going to boat next. So it's really exciting stuff.
I bet the majority of fish, probably the big fish, come on bait, I guess.
No, the biggest fish this year was, I think, 37, and that came on a lure. And you catch loads of big fish on lures. It's just that most people haven't got confidence in lures. And to be honest, just sat there in a boat, because you're allowed to use 2 rods. So you could have 2 of you in a boat, 4 floats out all day. For me, it's a bit boring, to be perfectly honest. And being a fly fisherman, I want to make things happen. And with lures, you can actually make them happen.
Yeah.
You know, if you go out and you're fishing dead baits, the only way that you know those fish are feeding is if you get a run. Whereas if you're lure fishing, you can cast out and you can get a follow first cast. And as soon as you get a follow, you know those fish are active. They might not be taking, but they're active. So you then concentrate in an area and concentrate on changing your lures and your patterns and that sort of thing, same as you would with flies, and try and get those fish to take. And, it's not in my nature to wait for things to happen. And from the bank, it's even worse. A lot of people now are using bait boats. They can take the dead baits out as much as 200 meters. You've got a 6-ounce lead that's holding your dead bait, down hard on the bottom. So you're effectively fishing a bolt rig. So the fish will hook itself. And then your alarm goes off and you get up and play the fish in. It's all fishing. So if that's what people enjoy, that's fine. Absolutely fine. That doesn't do it for me, unfortunately.
Yeah. So how old do these pike go to then? Say, for instance, a 30-pound pike. As you said, 2 to 3 pound a year. So does that mean they're sort of 10-year-old or a little bit more? 15
years old, a lot of them, in Trout and Pike. And it's been proven, I've done scale samples of both fish. And the scale samplers, the good ones, can tell you whether they've spawned in a year, whether it's been a good year, whether it's been a bad spawning year. There's an awful lot you can tell. They call it the dark arts. And scale analysis is really important. It does a lot more than just tell you how old the fish are. What I was trying to do is to prove with Bristol Water, some years ago, we were we're tagging fish just to sort of prove that these fish were older fish and trying to find out whether you had many recaptures, whether, the location of the fish. There's certain areas on the lake where if you catch a fish there, the next time you catch it, it will still be in the same area. But there's other parts of the lake that if you catch it, say at the dam, the next time you catch it could be anywhere on the lake.
They do travel then, these pike?
Oh, and they're, without any doubt, they're pack feeders. The best time to catch a big pike on chew is when your boat partner's playing one. When you get one, you get another, and they turn on. And they're so much more difficult than trout to work out when they're feeding. Trout, very much on Trout and Pike, they're both really hatch-driven lakes, which is why they're so good. And so when there's a big hatch, the fish feed. When they're not hatching, you still got to try and catch them.
Yeah.
And you can try and work out how you're going to catch them. But with the pike, there's certain times they feed and then they go off the feed for ages. People think that all you got to do is turn up at chew and you'll catch a 20-pound pike. No, that's not true. It's much harder, which is why I like lure fishing when the pike trials are on, because you can explore an awful lot of the lakes and you can try lots of different areas and you can try and aggravate them almost into taking. And I'm pretty convinced that the pike will take out of aggression on lures rather than out of feeding sometimes.
I learnt something about the scales and the age of the fish. I didn't have a clue how it worked because the 25 ferox I had, the scales were sent away and it was 12 years old. And I thought, well, how do they actually do it? And it's very similar to a tree, isn't it? There's circles
absolutely.
on them. It's like each season is a band. It's quite fascinating.
It is fascinating, and hardly anybody does it. I've got, when I go fishing now, in my bag always, I fish 7 days a week sometimes if I'm guided. And so I've got a pair of tweezers, some little, they've got to be paper envelopes. You don't store your scales that you've taken off the fish in polythene because they stay wet and then they rot. So you put them into paper to dry them out. That's a really important thing.
Right.
And all you do is you just catch hold of one of the scales just above the lateral line and below the dorsal fin is the best area. And you just catch them hold with a pair of tweezers. And all you do, you don't pull it against it or anything. You just give it a pull in the direction that they're in. And they just come away so easily.
Right.
You would think that those fish, whenever they're in a landing net, would shed their scales, but they don't. It's a really weird thing. But, I'm a bit fascinated by things like that. I'm fascinated by the insects that fish feed on. I'm fascinated by the fish themselves. I suppose I ought to get out more, really, but there you are.
But, you're saying you would tag the pike. So you don't necessarily just tag big pike, because if you tag the small ones, you'd know their growth rate then, I guess.
Yeah, I've tagged them from £1 to £35 over the years. And here's the funny thing. I caught one pike 3 times in 2 days. And I know it was the pike that I'd caught because it had a tag in it. So the first time I caught it on a dead bait and I tagged it. Later that afternoon, I caught it on a lure.
Yeah.
Same fish. And the following day, I went back to a similar area, not the same area, similar area, and caught it again on a dead bait. And it fought harder that day than it did the 2 times I caught it the day before. And that was 5.5 pounds. And there's other fish that you'll tag and you'll catch them almost a year to the day that you caught it the year before in the same area.
Yeah.
It's weird the way things turn up sometimes. And then you can weigh the fish. But the thing is, a fish might say put on 3 pounds in a year, but it could be that it's still got spawn in it.
Yeah.
So there's lots of factors that, come to play as whether a fish has put on weight or not. It might have, 1.5 pound roach in it. It might have a pound perch in it. So that's going to put weight on.
Yeah.
So it's not a definitive thing. So if you do, a random sample, over the years that I've done, it's a good sample that the scientists can work out the population of the fish in the lake as well. But we've got masses of perch. We caught perch. There's loads of, I've been out on Chew fishing 2 flies for perch and doubled up 14 times where they're both over 3 pounds at the same time. That was on an afternoon where we caught over 100 perch to the boat. Everything grows big in Chew. Pike to 44 pounds, brown trout to 22 pounds, rainbow trout to 20 pounds. The biggest perch that any of my clients ever caught was £4.10. Fantastic fish.
Yeah.
My biggest is 4.6. Both of those were caught on replicant lures, funnily enough, and they were perch replicants.
Wow.
So, there's huge roach in Chew. I caught £3 2-ounce roach on a dialback nymph. The thing is with the roach, though, is that since we've had big numbers of cormorants, the big roach have disappeared, unfortunately. They do get predated on. We get between 200 and 400 cormorants overwintering on Chew, and that's a ridiculous number, far, far too many. And they do destroy your silverfish.
Yeah.
And that's the annoying thing, because if they're the staple diet of the pike, then and you get the cormorants that are predating on huge numbers of roach and perch, there is a chance that the pike might change their diet and turn to the trout. So we really don't want large numbers of cormorants. And the great thing is, Chew Valley Lake and Blagden Lake were overflowing at the beginning of this year, and they were overflowing in November and December last year. And the cormorants clear off because they got nowhere to roost. So we haven't got large numbers of cormorants left on Chew now this year. Before the season finished, we had over 200 on Chew Valley alone, but they're gone. So because they can't hunt so well, so which is great news. If the water is managed properly, like Chew and Blagden are, then you can have roach, rudd, perch, pike, and trout all living together quite happily.
Do you think the new pike record is going to come from Chew or Blagden?
Well, the record really was broken a couple of times in a day on Blagden a few years ago, but it was never claimed and it wasn't an official record. So we knew at one stage there were pike in excess of 48 pounds on Blagden. We've had them over 44 on Chew already, and I think that there's a good chance that the record will go on either Chew or Blagden. So it's fingers crossed, really. But, that 46-12, still going to take a lot of beating. But hopefully one day somebody will get a 50, and hopefully it'll be on a fly from Chew or Blagden. Wouldn't that be good?
That would be good, wouldn't it? So what is the score with, there's a window, isn't there? There's only certain times you can pike fish on Blagden and Chew.
On Blagden, you can only fish on the fly for pike, and there's just 5 boats allowed per day for a short period of time. So we normally get a short period in May and then another short period in October. So that's it. And the rest of the time, there is no pike fishing allowed on Blagden. Yeah. So they're keeping it down to try and protect the stocks of pike, to not put any pressure on them. And also, Blagden's only 440 acres as opposed to 1,200 acres at Chew. Yeah. On Chew, you can fly fish for pike right through the season, but there's pike trials where you can fish artificial lures and saltwater dead baits. And once again, they're for limited periods, for limited amounts of boats. In February, this year, sadly, it's been cancelled, so there's not going to be any February pike trials. But then there's some more in October and November, and they're always very, very popular. And it's a great way of catching fish, and it also helps to supplement the income for the fisheries. And every single fishery now needs as much income as they can get to survive. And we've got major problems coming at Chew and Blagden, major problems.
Yeah, I've noticed there's rumours saying about Tuesdays are numbered. So what is the score?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked as a pro guide with Bristol Water for 28 years now, and I've worked with the staff and I've worked behind the scenes trying to promote the fisheries, because Chew is my favourite fishery in the world, and in my opinion, it's one of the best, if not the best, trout fishery in the world. If you can catch fish on Chew regularly, you can go anywhere in the world and catch that, and I've proved that when I've given clinics in different parts of the northern and southern hemisphere. So very important fisheries. But Bristol Water have announced that they feel that they don't run the fishing properly. This isn't the fisheries saying this. This is Bristol Water head office as a company, and they're privately owned. So they say that they're not making the amount of revenue they should, so they want somebody else to take over the running of the fishery, which is very sad news, because there's not many people got the experience or the necessary financial input to actually take over running the fishery. Yeah. I know Ivor Jones has made a great job at Draycott and Ibrook, but they're both much smaller fisheries than Chew and Blagden, and Ivor's already fully loaded with his fisheries. So it's hoping that somebody will take over the fishing, and short of maybe a community trust doing it, if nobody takes it over, it'll finish. It's as sad as that. And there's absolutely no reason why the fisheries should stop, because there's fantastic history with both lakes. Yeah. Blagden's been open since 1902. Chew has been open since 1956. They are two of the best trout, pike and perch fisheries in the world. And they've got massive history and great legacy. And to me, it's an absolute fiasco if we're going to lose those fisheries. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen, because if it's about purely making money, there is a little bit more nowadays, as this coronavirus pandemic has proved. People are now going back to fishing and going back to things where they can spend time on their own. Yes. They can spend time helping their mental health. And fishing is one of those activities that has seen a massive increase in interest again during 2020. In this country alone, we've sold more than 500,000 extra rod licenses this year. Fishing tackle companies have sold out of tackle, such as the demand thing. It's been an incredible increase. And also, it's been proven that fishing is absolutely beneficial to people's mental health. Yeah. And this virus isn't going to go away anywhere quick. People need things to do, and people need things to stay sane. And fishing is definitely up there. And I think it would be criminal, nothing short of criminal, if we were to lose Chew Valley and Blagden Lakes as major fisheries just because of a few balance sheet items in companies that make millions of pounds of profit. Well, I also think that it would be the short end of the wedge. I think other water companies would start to think, well, we'll offload them as well. And it's all about offloading and making short-term profit. And it is, in my opinion, criminal.
Welsh Water's in the same situation now. There's Llysyfran is closed for fishing, Llandegfydd, and there's one or two others which I've heard now, which are in the pipeline. And it's just a case of they're all going to go. And they say, it's because it doesn't pay.
There are ways that these fisheries can be run at a profit, definitely. Yeah. And Ivor Jones has proven that. Russell Owen and co up at Clywedog have proved it. You know, they're stocking their fish. They're stocking big numbers of fish because people need to catch fish nowadays. That's what they want to do when they go fishing. They want to catch fish. Yeah. And places like Clywedog are actually benefiting from it. But it's to the demise, unfortunately, of places like Llandeg, Llysyfran, Brennig. There's another fishery which is one of my favourite fisheries. Yeah. And is seeing dropping numbers of anglers. But great fisheries. But you've got to ask yourself, you know, the way that they're being run, are they being run properly? And I think I can understand some of the fisheries changing and streamlining. But what I don't agree with is the way that you have something like a fantastic facility, which is a lake, which has picnic areas and is selling car parking tickets for those picnic areas. which is pretty much money in the bank for very little outgoings. And they're also, some of them have got their own restaurants on site, which they realise are very profitable. Some are leasing them out and getting income from the lease without having to do anything else or employ any staff, which is a cheap way of doing things and probably not maximising the amount of money they could make. And then they have the fishing, which also has its own budgets. If you run all those together in one big budget, you will make a profit. But if you want to split them all up into small parts, you'll get the car parking making nothing but a profit, because really all you've got, your expenditure, is anything that happens to the barriers and people actually collecting the money out of the payment machines. So there's no real expenditure of that. But without the lake itself, you wouldn't be able to make that money because nobody would come there. So you can quite easily adjust your budgets to make all these places pay.
Yeah.
But it's just that the water companies at the moment are the culprits, which is down to bottom line only, I think. And they're just keeping the things within their budgets that make the most money and getting rid of the rest. And I think they owe more to our future generations to actually keep these fisheries going. And I think they really should be made to provide the facilities they've been providing all these years. But unfortunately, under a lot of the Ofwat regulations in recent years, they have to provide recreational facilities, but that doesn't mean they still got to provide them in the way that they used to. And I think that should change.
Oh, it'd be a crying shame if Blagdon and Chew was to finish. I've got some of these special memories of both places, really, and that lodge in Blagdon and the history in there.
Yeah.
And they used to have cased fish there, didn't they? And they got broken into.
They still have.
Because some got stolen, didn't they?
Yeah, they lost some of them, and we think they were probably stolen to order because there were double-cased Cooper Brothers Victorian stuffed trout, and they've never appeared. They've never appeared in any auctioneers or anything, auctioneer rooms. So we think that they're probably stolen to order, but there are still some stuffed trout there and some old fish, and it's a great lodge to go to.
Yeah.
And it's full of history, that place. And the other thing is, when you hold competitions on these lakes, because we hold major competitions on Chew and Blagdon, we've had a world championships held on Chew and Blagdon, we've had internationals, and we still will have internationals held on Chew. And I run my big competition, the Anglers World, the Lexus, the Cortland competitions. And when we run these days, all the B&Bs in the area are sold out. All the pubs and restaurants are full with people eating and drinking. It's great for the local community, which is going to be lost if you lose these lakes for fishing. There's a bigger input if anything happens. And, we've got to try to make sure that we don't lose these fisheries.
Yeah. Well, hopefully now this season will be the turning point, and maybe, especially after this lockdown, something will come of it and people will want to get out more. So maybe that will be the turning point. But
let's hope so. We're doing as much as we can via Bristol Reservoirs Fly Fishers Association to work with John Harris at Bristol Water, who's doing his utmost to try and keep the fishing going. And, he really does need a pat on the back for all the hard work him and his team have done over the last year or so.
Yeah.
And he's still working hard. So, hats off to John Harris and co at Bristol Water. They need support from their head office.
Yeah.
A lot more support.
Well, there's lots of things I wanted to talk to you about.
Blimey.
Like your TV work. You've done stuff with Chris Tarrant as well, haven't you? And to see what you've got planned for this year and the future. And what
we've hardly talked about trout, have we really? Which is a great love.
I know. Well, we will. I'd love to have a chat with you again when the season kicks off. Now, it'll be good, and then you can maybe chat about your guiding for the fly fishing for the trout. Because we haven't spoken about the trout really, but you've obviously travelled all over the world, and this leads me to my last question. Of all the places you've been, where would you want to be to make your last cast?
Do that is a very hard question. It really is. I have been lucky. I've fished some great places. I fished, like you say, all around the world. Great memories like fishing for rooster fish in Panama, for gum beetle feeders on fantastic trout lakes in Tasmania, stalking bonefish in Cuba, catching massive tarpon in Florida. But I've got to say, that I'm just as happy casting hoppers at big dry fly feeding rainbow trout on Chew Valley Lake. So that's probably where it would be. And it's still one of my favourite places.
Do you know what? I was going to put my money on you were going to say that. Yeah.
I think we're a little bit the same in the way we like our fishing, Ceri.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for the chat. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's good to catch up. Hopefully next year I will make an effort to come at least to Blackdown or Chew, and then maybe share a boat again.
I reckon we ought to, yeah. And if you want to do another follow-up to this, just give me a ring and we'll do it.
I will do.
Likewise, Ceri. All the best, mate.
Thanks a lot, John. Cheers now. If this is your first time tuning in, make sure you catch all future episodes by clicking subscribe via the links on my website, castingwithcerijones.com, or via iTunes or your favourite podcatcher. If you like what you've heard on this episode, feel free to drop me a line via my website. Tell me what you've enjoyed, ask a question, or better yet, tell me what you want to hear more of in the future. And if you're looking for additional tips, tackle reviews or venue information, or just want to see what's been hitting the back of my net lately, search up Casting with Ceri Jones on Facebook or follow me on Instagram. And if you still want more, I'm regularly uploading video content onto the Casting with Ceri Jones YouTube channel, so just check that out and subscribe over there too. Wherever you follow, subscribe, comment or message, I look forward to catching up soon for a good fishing chat. Well, I think that's all for now, so until next time, tight lines and don't strike too soon.